So 1300 categories, if you imagine, and a nested tree of almost 6 to 7 levels became a nightmare to manage for anybody, for the
Yeah.
whole team.
Yeah.
And they were losing sight of it. And what that led to was a lot of times they were pushing wrong data on the eBay.
Yep.
And product information going wrong or product image going wrong is a
Yeah.
nightmare. Now, they also had a system wherein they had to set up the image names following a very specific convention. You make one mistake
Yeah.
and the image will not show up, or
Yep.
image will show up in the wrong product.
Growing a business requires a holistic approach that extends beyond sales and marketing. This approach needs alignment among people, processes, and technologies. So if you're a business owner, operations, or finance leader looking to learn growth strategies from your peers and competitors, you're tuned into the right podcast. Welcome to the WBS Podcast, where scalable growth using business systems is our #1 priority. Now, here is your host, Sam Gupta.
Hey everyone, welcome back to another episode of the WBS Podcast. I'm Sam Gupta, your host and principal consultant at the independent ERP and digital transformation consulting firm Elevate IQ. E-commerce tech has evolved significantly with substantial overlap among different tools. Inventory is one layer that is shared by several systems, with each serving a very different perspective. When commerce refers to inventory, it only cares for counts and ignores other elements that might be relevant for other layers. But not normalizing the front end of inventory layer can lead to issues such as findability impacting sales. In today's episode, our guest, Vikram Saxena, discusses the nuances of product taxonomy and enrichment for e-commerce merchants. He also debates several concepts with Sam like API first and headless architecture, the role of inventory reconciliation from the lenses of commerce, different inventory layers, and how they each serve different perspectives. Finally, he shares several stories where they have helped companies normalize their SKUs and taxonomy and the impact they had on those companies. Let me introduce Vikram to you. Vikram is a composable commerce expert. He knows all about APIs and what happens backstage within e-commerce platforms that improve product information and CX. Mid-market retailers who have outgrown their technology and want solutions before re-platforming will appreciate Vikram's insights. With that, let's get to the conversation.
Hey Vikram, welcome to the show.
Hey, Sam, pleasure to be here. How
Of
you doing today?
course. And I am very excited to have you as well. Anybody from e-commerce community, there is just so much happening overall in the space, and it's always fascinating how much we can all learn. And my listeners are going to be super pleased to hear this conversation. Just to kick things off, if my listeners might not know you, do you want to start with your quick intro as well as your current focus?
Yeah, Sam. So I've been now writing code for the last 26 years. Started my career as pretty much a Microsoft Office trainer, but somehow it developed a fancy for computers and then got into programming
Yeah.
despite not having a technical background. That led to me into the fascinating world of computers and programming. 10 years I worked in the corporate world across US, Europe, and
Yeah.
UK. And before I started my own IT services company back in 2007.
Yeah.
2016 is when I started my product company called Better Commerce, which basically is an end-to-end commerce platform offering, PIM, order management, commerce, analytics, and AI-driven recommendation engine as well on top of it. So that's a very short brief about myself.
Okay, very interesting. So obviously I'll be peeling a lot of layers and we need to understand where your product sort of fits and the problem that you are solving for the customers. But before we do that, we have one of these standard questions that we ask every single guest, and that is going to be, Vikram, your perspective on business growth.
So it's very interesting, Sam, that you asked me my perspective on business growth. When I look at it from our perspective, from a tech perspective, I think today's day and age, technology has become a huge enabler for growth of any business, especially in the SME space, where a lot of companies can punch a lot of more than up their weight and generate more growth using technology the right way. And they can potentially generate more value squeeze more value out of each dollar if they use the technology in the right way, in the right context. The problem happens when a lot of times they get into projects which tend to become very long cycle, and by the time they get to completion of that project, that's when it becomes a bit of a challenge that the technology is already become obsolete. Then growth is a very tipsy-turvy, journey. It's not a linear path as such. It never goes straight. You learn some, you make some mistakes, and then you grow from there. And it's essential for every business to drive growth. Be it retail, be it small medium market business, be it any business. Every business essentially lives and grows and breathes for growth, right? So it's extremely crucial that you constantly are moving towards that perspective, towards that goal, and have that incorporated in the organizational DNA to constantly keep improving and finding ways to move faster and better.
Yeah, so very interesting. And speaking of growth, one of the things that is really growing, at least in 2024, is going to be e-commerce tech, to be completely honest, okay? And happening because of so many different reasons. Number one, the number of channels that the businesses have to deal with has increased substantially. Obviously, when you are going to have that, your maintenance admin is going to increase. And because of that, new technologies are going to pop up. So we have done a lot of different episodes related to e-commerce technologies, and the focus that you have, whether you talk about PIM or any other e-commerce technologies. So one of the things that really excite me is obviously, number one, we would like to understand where your product sort of fits in. Each industry is going to have very unique needs as well. And even if you might not consider a specific product category as your competitor, but they are kind of going to be a competitor. So I'll be touching on those technologies that I am coming across from my experience, but maybe start talking about, which industries you are really focusing on, where your product is really fit, and maybe touch on some of the problems as well, the problems that the customers have where you or some of your competitors are trying to solve that, I guess.
Yeah. So basically, the problems that we look at, from the perspective, who are the customers that we typically aim for, and what was the genesis of building this platform?
Yeah.
So if I just give you a quick background on that,
Please.
we were building very large scale systems for large scale Fortune 500 companies when I was doing the IT services business. And one of our arm actually still continues to do that. So we had built a huge system for a company called Tech Data, which is a Fortune $37 billion business across globe. US, Europe, and UK, all over the world. We had built a huge system, which basically back about 13 years ago was the changed the whole distribution industry of software. So if you remember, about 15 years ago, when you wanted to buy a software, you would go to probably Best Buy or PC World in the UK or Saturn in the Europe area, and then you would basically take a box of software and go and pay at the till for that. Right. So what we built that was called ESD, Electronic Software Delivery Software. And we built a digital vault which brought together Microsoft, Symantec, Adobe, and tons of other software vendors in one place. So you could potentially buy a software from Microsoft, Symantec, Adobe in one order from any of these resellers, and you could consume those keys right then and there without having to go to buy it at a store. What that did was it reduced the whole inventory cycle for all of those resale businesses and the distributors as well. And that changed the whole dynamics of the software distribution industry. And we had built this a very large scale platform, which was basically used across 17 countries in Europe, US, Canada, and UK as well. Now, when we built that, we realized, we have significant talent and knowledge in terms of building large scale systems. But one thing that we came from was the enterprise systems. And what we found was a lot of times enterprise systems tend to be, people were a little afraid of it, going to large scale businesses. And the budgets were always high. So we wanted to build a system which had the enterprise grade quality, and mid-market businesses could potentially afford it without burning a huge hole in the pocket. And also allowed them the flexibility to extend it the way they wanted it to without hiring an army of integration developers, basically. That was the origin of it. So when we started doing it, we started with one simple module for eComme. And then we realized, product was absolute essential in there. So we built a PIM module in there as well. Then gradually we realized people would need CMS. Now, at the time, most of these modules, there are businesses which do just one module at a time.
Yeah.
And there are companies which are super successful delivering just one of these modules.
Yeah.
So we said, there are businesses which need these large modules as well, but then there are companies which don't need all of those 500 features available in a single software, but they would need essential capabilities which they could use to run the business rather than building the whole tech on their own.
Yeah.
So that was the idea. We picked up the most commonly used capabilities from all of these modules and built this platform end to end to support these small and medium-sized businesses without going through a huge large-scale enterprise project, if that makes sense. So our primary problem that we were solving was reduce the time that it takes to bring your whole online business, take your business online or digital.
Yeah.
Bring it is almost like doing a symphony of all of these capabilities from end to end, rather than trying to tie them all up with an integration army and try to work with 7, 8, or 8 different vendors.
Yeah.
So these were the main problems that we were trying to address, and this is what all the customers that we work with, they all give us the same feedback. That they've rarely come across a platform which does all of this end to end.
Yeah, so very interesting perspective. So I am going to touch on some of the layers based on my experience, what I have seen in the market. So one of the layers that you have mentioned is the software distribution business. And in my mind, that's a very unique business. In fact, I mean, any of the franchise-centric business, I guess, where you are going to require the channel integration, they are very unique from the commerce perspective. There are some platforms, and I don't know who you consider your competitors, and if you will be open to revealing those, I guess, on the podcast. But it's always a interesting conversation. So I'll give you my perspective in terms of who I am seeing, as some of the competitors. So overall, in my mind, when I look at different commerce platforms in 2024, you have the newer enterprise players right now. Obviously they are championing the headless microservices, the Mark architecture. You talk about commerce tools, etc. Right? They are doing that, and that's a very, very, very different problem. I don't know if your architecture is going to be microservices based, but that's a very enterprise centric problem in that you are going to be investing a lot in your development. It's not supposed to be sweet in the box kind of offering. The way you are describing your offering is more sweet in the box, which works slightly more for mid-market companies. There are companies that have taken sort of the middle ground. For example, if you talk about eCommerce, they have kind of microservices architecture. Now, some people might disagree with me on that, I guess. But then they also have sweet in the box integration as part of their platform. Then you have, I guess, and I don't know who your closest competitor is going to be. In my mind, it'll be something like Unilock, because they have suite in the box offering. They are targeting very large manufacturing distribution centric ecosystem. Obviously, you are not there. That's a very different business model, very different channel integration than what you are doing. So I know I mentioned a lot of names there. So maybe you can touch on which are your competitors and how do you compare with these guys?
So technologically and complete technical architecture perspective, Sam, we built the whole platform more like a API first and headless platform.
Yeah.
In terms of, so that's one aspect of it, and that's one dimension to it.
Yeah.
And in terms of the functional capabilities, so on one module, which is commerce APIs, we commerce tools is our competitor. And at the same time, Salesforce also happens to be our competitor. A lot of times we are pitching against Salesforce. A lot of times we are pitching against commerce tools. And at the same time, what we also do is we go to a lot of organizations where we pitch in with PIM only. So there are organizations which already have all of this, infrastructure in terms of their headless already running, and they're looking for a suitable PIM go forward.
Yeah.
So then we pitch in for PIM as well. And in the world of PIM, we potentially pitch against the likes of Athenium or Plytix, or there are a few other PIM providers as well. Similarly, we pitch against, in the CMS world as well, against the likes of Contentful or similar CMS providers as well.
Yeah.
Now, the way we have built all of these capabilities are these modules are standalone modules on their own. So from the headless world, what new has come out is a composable architecture.
Yeah.
So we have built it more in a composable architecture where the customers don't really have to go a big bang approach. What we realized was a lot of customers, and being a newer brand, it becomes even more difficult, not a hugely known brand, it becomes difficult for us to convince customers to go completely with us. So in that scenario, what we say is, okay, you try out our PIM and then you see how it works for you. And then gradually, so we use PIM basically to get the customer to wet their feet, learn about the platform, and it's not something that breaks everything in their business, because commerce is the core strategy for any retail business, right?
Yeah.
The whole e-com system. And once we have built that level of confidence with them, they typically come back to us, oh no, we love your product, and we would now like to upgrade and go for potentially the whole commerce suite as well. So that's how we've approached it. In terms of competition, like I said, we stand alone. Our standalone modules compete with different companies in different spaces, and that's pretty much about it. And technically, like I said, it's a fully composable and headless architecture.
Yeah, so very interesting. And obviously, I'm going to have some counter there, and maybe you want to clarify a little bit. So obviously, API first is great, headless is great, but microservices architecture, individually deployable components, the way the enterprise architecture is going to be for these massive systems. Again, they are trying to attack a very different problem, to be completely honest. Okay, overall, from the infrastructure footprint perspective, because when you look at the massive retail workloads, the cost of infrastructure is going to be so high that they cannot put everything on one rail, because then they are going to get massive cloud bill in our mind,
Yeah.
right? So that's why the
Yeah.
microservices architecture matter, at least in my mind, the way it is designed. So that's why, see, they are, again, the commerce tool in my mind is a very different offering that would not work for mid-market, because the kind of deals that we run into, because mid-market, they don't have as much IT budget to be able to figure out the integration, and composable architecture is great, but integration is hard, especially when you talk about integrating transactional based systems. So for example, let's say if you're simply doing CMS integration, probably doing content based system integration, that's probably easy. Okay, PIM is probably going to be okay. Okay, but when you get into the real financial transactions, which is going to be your POS, and in your space, my assumption would be that basically when we are looking at these different architecture, especially different platforms, in our mind, especially when you look at the financial transactions, when you are going to have financial transactions, the integration is going to be very, very, very different.
True.
It doesn't matter which platform it is. It ends up being very complicated, very complex when you get into the scenarios such as master data management. And I'm not talking about master data management just from the marketing perspective. Okay, marketing is still very easy. Okay, when you talk about master data management in reconciling your product definition, categories, etc., that's all easy. But when you get into the real commerce transactions, where you have to reconcile these financial transactions, that's where the real difficulty is in our experience. So when we think about these architectures, so unless you are going to have very large IT budget to be able to implement something like commerce tools, in our mind, these two are completely distinct offerings. When you look at enterprise grade offerings, which is going to be slightly more Mac architecture versus your suite in the box, which is slightly more mid-market friendly. That's how we see it. I don't know how you see it. Vikram, maybe you want to provide your input.
So Sam, when you talk about massive financial transactions and master data management, I think all of those, typically, if you look at even commerce tool doesn't do or doesn't get into financial transaction reconciliation. Commerce tools is primarily your commerce engine from the perspective of building your online storefronts and going digital. Could be B2B or could be B2C.
Yeah.
Functionally, that's what it is supposed to do. All your financial transaction reconciliation that you're talking about is primarily lies in the domain of the large-scale enterprise ERP systems, which are more designed to handle all of those capabilities and large volume loads on a day-to-day basis. Of course, having said that, all of these microservices architecture now, these are two different things altogether. Those massive data reconciliations that you're talking about really doesn't have, I don't think really has much to do with the headless or the Mac architecture as such. Those elements have been there for quite a long time, and they will continue to remain the way they have, and they will continue to evolve at their own pace as the technology evolves. I mean, you could look at SAP or Microsoft Dynamics, or which has now become Business Central. There are loads of ERPs which basically do that. Most of these commerce systems that you look at from a Mac architecture perspective, they are primarily designed to build more richer end customer experiences rather than the back-end processes.
Yeah.
So these are more designed from that perspective and more agility from that perspective.
Yeah.
Whereas those backend systems are designed to provide that robustness and stability and ensuring all the compliances are in place and all the large scale volume and enterprise elements are handled. Having said that, we do not target tier one companies any which way. For us, the target is the mid-market businesses who don't want to, have a huge budget or a huge timeline to implement a project, if that makes sense.
It does, and that would be my perception. To be completely honest, of your product, the value prop that you have, it would make more sense for slightly more mid-market companies which don't have as much IT budget, and that they are trying to solve different problem. So I'm going to retouch again on some of the points that you mentioned, and then maybe you can clarify those as well. So overall, in the way you provided the description, I guess, if you look at retail, okay, so retail is a very different space in general. The way retail architecture works. And yes, you are sort of in retail, but you are kind of not in retail. And I don't know how much you have done, in the pure play retail. So when you look at pure play retail, meaning you are talking about the retail and manufacturing value chain versus this value chain is also similar, but different. The problems that they are going to have are going to be very different. So typically in the pure play retail architecture where systems like commerce tools are playing, typically the way the architecture works is they store the state of inventory inside their commerce OMS layer. And I don't know, I mean, you
do that as well. Yeah, we do that as well.
So, okay, so you are saying that the inventory layer is going to reside inside your platform, the state of inventory.
Yes. So the way it works is, and again, it varies from one organization to another organization. And what we've seen is a lot of businesses already have huge investments into maintaining their retail stores. So for example, now the inventory, we have a customer based in UK, which has about 250 stores. Now, those 250 stores, they of course have their own inventory. Now, all of that data is managed through their ERP. Now that inventory, we don't, as a e-commerce platform, which becomes the face for the customer when anybody goes to the website. We don't want to be storing and loading the whole commerce system engine to basically store inventory at a store level. So the way it works is then you do the integration between your commerce layer and your ERP, which basically provides an ongoing or a continuous basis, could be different depending upon various architectures, depending upon various business needs. It could be that we make a real-time call to the customer's ERP system and get the inventory at a store level. From a consolidated perspective, we always store an items inventory which is orderable online. Which means the inventory that they can order and place an order from an online perspective. When it comes to store inventory, we make a call on a regular basis, or they feed that to us on a regular basis, which could be the frequency could depend upon business need and the movement of the inventory, which could be 5 minutes, 10 minutes, 15 minutes, 1 minute as well. And then the inventory is synced on a continuous basis. So in this, the way it works is you have to define one system as the master of the inventory, which typically would be the ERP or whatever system sitting in the back end, which is managing their inventory across all the stores and all of their warehouses. Right. And in that scenario, we just make that call, get that data, bring it to the customer's front and show it to them on the website as well. Okay, this store has this item in this many units, and you can pick it up in next 30 minutes or so. That's how it works.
So very interesting. So again, every industry is going to treat these problems differently. Okay. And inventory, when we look at, inventory, when you are looking at technical problems, it's easy. When you look at the enterprise-wide inventory state, it's a different problem. Okay. So when you look at enterprise-wide inventory state, number one, inventory is going to have many layers. Number one is going to be your count. Number two is going to be your allocation. Number three is going to be cost side of the equation, which is very different. Now, when commerce refers to inventory, they are only worried about counts. From the finance perspective, count is sure it's an inventory, but that's like 10% of the inventory. It's not everything, right? Now, when you look at retail, the speed is so high, the transactional speed is so high that you cannot really embed these 200 tables with your transactions because the transaction is going to be so slow that you cannot you cannot really meet the customer fulfillment time.
Right? Absolutely. And this is why commerce from a customer facing perspective, you only care about the count. All the back-end engineering, all the elements that you're talking about are absolutely true. And they typically sit within whatever ERP is or whatever your inventory master is. Whatever system is maintaining your inventory, the commerce facing the customer. So there are two elements of it. One, like I said earlier as well, there is a back-end angle to it and there's a front-end element to it, customer-facing element. You don't want to be telling your customer, there are 100 elements to inventory. Customer only cares what's available for me. And that's exactly what Commerce Engine or the front-end part does for that. And that's exactly what we do.
Yeah. So now going back to your point that you mentioned that you don't get into reconciliation. If you get into inventory, you have to get into reconciliation, because reconciliation is a count. Okay. A count, enterprise count of a pool that is moving, that is being touched by many, many, many different channels. And if you are going to be off even by one, you are off. What reconciliation means is you are reconciling to a penny, where you are going to have accurate state of every single product that you have in your inventory, whether that is sitting in your warehouse or in a store or anywhere else. That's how accurate the inventory is going to be. Otherwise, typically when you look at the overarching level, right, things add up. We have seen scenarios where businesses don't necessarily have the inventory visibility of $1 million, $2 million, sometimes I don't know, multi-million dollars. That's how big the problem is when you don't have the clear state of reconciliation. Now, I will tell you one more thing, on your point related to APIs are great, technical systems are great. In my mind, when I look at these reconciliation models from the business perspective, typically they are driven by the number of data stores that you have. It's almost like two buckets or multiple buckets that you have in your architecture, and you are trying to count them, and they all are being updated. Now, physically speaking, it becomes very, 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 very hard to maintain the count, because what you are trying to do is you are literally trying to look up in one bucket and you want the exact state of the inventory. Now, if you go back to your retail transactions, okay, for example, apparel, okay, in apparel, you are literally allocating based on size, style, season. The problem is that big. And if you're going to be off, the consumer is probably going to be pissed off.
Absolutely. So Sam, to be honest, like you said, I don't think reconciliation, I will again go back to the same thing. Backend is backend. Whatever you're talking about is the backend processes. I'm talking about the customer facing processes. Commerce, the actual commerce, okay, backend processes are absolutely critical and important indeed. All of that reconciliation is important. When you talked about initially reconciliation, you mentioned about financial transactions. I said business systems, commerce systems are not designed to do that financial transaction reconciliation. Right? Now you've changed that dimension from financial transaction to inventory reconciliation. Inventory reconciliation, typically inventory movements are always synchronous. Whenever inventory changes in one part, there are systems which are designed, and you mentioned that businesses lose inventory of $1 million, $2. I really feel bad and sorry for them that something is not right in their implementation, because I have rarely come across businesses which have inventory running in that stage, of course. But then it comes into the point that, okay, inventory could be lost for multiple reasons. And there are different reasons where it is lost in the transit, the goods have been damaged in the transit, or goods are lost in the warehouse. But if you have multiple warehouses running, typically the synchronization, and if you are doing inventory transactions with full integrity and asset properties, then they would be automatically synced across the board. And from a customer facing perspective, you provide him a single view of the inventory rather than telling him 100 views or 100 different elements around the inventory. Customer only cares how much is available, can I order it? And that's what we care more about. And the rest of the element remains pretty much more like you say that API, you tend to downplay the API. Okay, API is good, it's simple, the count is simple. I don't think these things are really simple as you probably try to make it out to be. But these things are as complex as anything else in the technology world. And they make the whole engine go around, and they make the customer transaction, customer experience much better than what it should be. And they enrich that customer experience. And that's what we focus primarily on.
So let's talk about enrichment, I guess. So maybe share a story related to enrichment in terms of what you have seen. Describe the specifics of the story, where the customer was, what were the enrichment problems, and if you have done any sort of governance around that, obviously that will be interesting to discuss.
Yeah, absolutely. So we recently did a PIM implementation for a customer, and this is a very good customer that we initially went in with PIM. They said, okay, we'll take your PIM, but we are not ready to do the whole replatforming. And they have more than 100,000 SKUs. They are into the machinery, tools, power, all of those elements, batteries, and they do, I think, 150 million annually.
Yeah.
So, like I said, we focus primarily on the mid-market businesses. They're a
Yeah.
UK-based business, a few stores, but primary channel for them is the marketplaces and their online website as well. So when we went to them, they had pretty much about almost, 3,000. No, sorry, they had more than 1 second. Just give me 1 second. Yeah, they had more than 1,300 categories.
Oh, okay.
And they had more than 15,000 attributes defined across those 1,300 categories.
Yeah.
Now that was a huge volume of data managing, and especially they had more than 100,000 SKUs, which becomes a very challenging element. And when I asked them, how is this data not so well maintained? Now, they said there are certain SKUs which are pretty much 15 years old.
Yeah.
Legacy. There's a lot of legacy built in there.
Yeah.
And it has all evolved organically. People change, processes change, product descriptions change.
Yeah.
There hasn't been any central way of doing it. We were doing initially in spreadsheets, then we built something in-house where we were maintaining all of this data. But over a period of time, it just got out of hand. So it became a bit of a challenge where they did not have anything central to manage this data. And the problem was their marketplace team. So they had different teams which were serving this data across different channels. Their marketplace team was preparing a separate spreadsheet to upload into Amazon, eBay, and other channels.
Yeah.
Then their online team was doing a different exercise, putting it all there. And then there was their whole in-house ERP which they had built, and they built on certain layers, certain existing ERP system, and that had different set of data, which had gradually, and there were categories which were defined more by application rather than the product actual categorization.
Right.
So this is where the taxonomy also comes into play. Having the right kind of taxonomy is extremely important. So all of that had led to a lot of superfluous category setup. This is what led to overall, and duplicate categories as well as part of that process. So 1,300 categories, if you imagine, and a nested tree of almost 6 to 7 levels became a nightmare to manage for anybody, for the whole team.
Yeah.
And they were losing sight of it. And what that led to was a lot of times they were pushing wrong data on the eBay.
Yeah.
And product information going wrong or product image going wrong is a nightmare.
Yeah.
Now, they also had a system wherein they had to set up the image names following a very specific convention. You make one mistake and the image will not show up, or image will show up in the wrong product.
Yeah.
That became a very time-consuming process. Now imagine 100,000 SKUs, 5 images for each product. That's 500,000 images to manage.
Yeah.
A huge exercise. Vendors are brands are sending images in their own names. Now they have to sit down and rename every image to upload it against the product.
Yeah.
It was a huge manual exercise. They pretty much had almost 3 to 4 people just doing that through the whole month.
Yeah.
So we went in and we supported them. What we can do is, so we first sat down, we did a few workshops and went through that whole taxonomy that they had set up in terms of categorization and everything.
Yeah.
So we helped them clean that up and we brought it down to almost 400 categories from 1,300. From 15,000 attributes, we help them identify which are the attributes or facets that can basically be globalized across the whole product catalog. And we trimmed it all down to almost 3,000 attributes. Now, every category, if you look at it, every category, battery will have different attributes.
Yeah.
Your power tools will have different attributes, different facets.
Yeah.
Certain attributes will be common, but certain attributes will be distinct to each category.
Yeah.
So we help them bring it all down to almost just 400 categories and 400 attribute sets and 3,000 attributes, which became a much more manageable number compared to what it was. We also then went through that whole cycle with them to review their data and help them clean it up and find the common factors in there and clean it all up and set it all up in mass.
Yeah.
So what we did was we gave them capability to do it in a bulk, to do it in one shot rather than doing it one by one.
Yeah.
Find patterns, prepare your data, and just upload it in one shot through the ping, or update it in one shot. So they could update thousands of SKUs, thousands of products in one shot without going through a huge cycle. Additionally, from an enrichment perspective, what we did with them was the CDN. We established a CDN, a reliable CDN for them, so that they could now utilize a single source of imagery to deliver images across different channels, to eBay, to Amazon or any other marketplaces there, and their website and their stores as well. Now, the data that you need in store is not necessarily rich attributes, because store product information you're not really going to show. Your store person is only going to see. Whereas in marketplaces, you only get certain attributes which are defined by the marketplace. You barely have much control over it. You just have to populate whatever the marketplace asks. On your website is the biggest channel where you can publish the maximum information from that perspective. And that's where we help them identify what elements go where. And we sat down with them, we did a workshop, identified the area. So potentially, let's say product specifications. Now, product specifications would be helpful in areas in store for your store people to know, and on your website for your customers to find out. Then facets for product discovery purposes. Product facets are extremely important when you're searching on any website. The product facets, you filter down by that, right? And at the end, a business which is doing more than £100 billion a year, for them, it is very important that the customers find the products that they're looking for within 1 or 2 clicks. Right? So facets are extremely important. And if you map the wrong facet, customer is not going to find the product and you lose the sale, right? Then setting up the related products. What products go along with this product? What products are alternatives for this product? What products have become obsolete and are replaced by this product? So all of these enrichment, we help them do that. Then we also help them do, identify in terms of email. Is another channel. Email is an outreach channel. It is not somebody that it's not a pull channel, but it's a push channel. So in push world, basically what you do is that we help them identify, okay, product core screenshots are good, but then lifestyle images also help you sell products better. So that's one thing that we have, and we help them tag them separately so that those lifestyle images don't start showing up on the PDP where the customer wants more specific product images rather than the lifestyle images. Because each channel has its own demand. So then you start configuring it that way. And then there are certain attributes that you would set up from a comparison perspective, from an enrichment. These attributes are going to allow to compare this product against a specific product, right? Because you will not compare. So if a product has 200 attributes, you're not going to compare that product on 200 attributes with another product, right? You will potentially compare on, battery ampere or anything around that. So you'll potentially compare around 50 or 10 or 50, 20 products, depending upon different categories. Then certain attributes or certain enrichment becomes your business's USP from that product perspective, which separates you from your competitors. So helping you set all of that up in a simple way, an easy way, and in a bulk way is what we help do that. And on top of it, then you build the governance around it. So eBay defines that you have to have these 20 attributes populated. A lot of times manual effort goes into when people start uploading spreadsheets without populating the essential data. And that's when we bring the governance side of it, that there is certain level of review, there's certain level of system level check that this product is ready for eBay, or this product is not ready for eBay, or this product is not ready for website. So all of that essentially helps in the governance, compliance, enrichment. All of this eventually leads you to sell more and provide your end customer better information, more accurate information to sell more. I hope that makes sense.
No, it does. It does. So I'm going to have one question there. So basically, my understanding of the story is that obviously the data was very flat and you try to normalize that, try to make it slightly more structured. And, that's probably going to be 90% of the businesses that their data is probably going to be all over the place. So let's say if somebody is starting on their journey and they really want to understand how to do this, what will be the process in your mind?
So typically the process, the first thing, what we have defined the process, after going through this exercise with various businesses, we've defined a very high level processes. First is, do a little bit of research, what company, what industry, and what is the standard taxonomy in there. How far is your current categorization or taxonomy from the industry taxonomy? That's one thing. That's the first step that anybody should potentially be doing. What we found is a lot of times people make mistakes of creating taxonomy based on the application, or a lot of times we've seen people doing taxonomy based on price also. So they will create a category where product is less than £100. No, that can't be a category. That shouldn't be part of your taxonomy. That's more of a merchandising product collection on the website, the way you're selling it. You can't create that as a category. Or for potentially, for gardening. So you will create a category for gardening. No, gardening is an application.
Yeah.
Or is an area of application. It
Yeah.
can't be. If a tool, there are 100 different varieties of tools that will be used in the gardening.
Yeah.
So you can't just say that this will go into the gardening. So
Yeah.
this is one big mistake we've seen across various businesses. And this is where we say, review your taxonomy from the perspective of what the product is, rather than its application or any other dimension attaching to it. Then define how do you want to see it at the end? What exactly, who are the audiences and who are the sales channels for it?
Yeah.
Right. So sales channels of the customer touch points are very important in terms of defining that as well, defining that element. Yeah. And then defining certain rules, because a lot of times certain data elements are driven from other attributes.
Yeah.
If this is this and this is this, then this property should be this.
Yep.
And you don't want to be populating this third cascaded property manually, because then the human problems, errors, the chances of errors are very huge.
Yeah.
And you will create a lot of inconsistency and lose data integrity.
Yeah.
Right. So these are certain steps that we recommend. And then we've defined an overall process to go through a specific questionnaire with them.
Yeah.
That, we go through show us the data. A lot of times we come across scenarios where customers say, our data is absolutely best.
Yeah.
We've got it in spreadsheet. And we recently migrated a company from their existing PIM to our PIM.
Yeah.
And they said our data is absolutely fully structured, really well. It's all sitting in PIM core. And we went in and we sat down and we did a few workshops. And then we said, okay, why is this there? And why is this there? Oh, we made a mistake here. Oh, we made a mistake here. We could not do this. We made mistake there. We thought we will do it in bulk, but we could not.
Yeah.
So a lot of times it always requires a third party or an independent view of your data to identify the gaps.
Yep.
But at the end, your business better than anybody from outside.
Yep.
Somebody from outside can potentially raise the right kind of questions to help you identify the gaps.
Yeah.
But at the end, you will have to contextualize that product data from your business perspective.
Right.
And defining the right clarity in terms of people and roles who are helping you clean up that data is very important.
Yeah, no, completely agree. And so I guess time flies when two experts are talking. So, I don't know if you're going to have any sort of closing advice for our listeners.
I think what I would say is, a lot of times people say that, this worked for that company and this worked for that company, so we're just going to go for that.
Yeah.
I would strongly advise doing anything like that and always evaluate any solution from the perspective of your context. Then, like people say, content is king. I always say it's not the content, it's the context which is the king.
Yep.
If you get the context right, then any content that you are fitting in that context will go right. So it's very important to contextualize the solution in your problem area and understand and map it against the gaps in your business to help you deliver a proper solution which adds value to the business, rather than just implement a technology solution for the sake of it. And at the end, one more small thing is always keep it simple. I mean, the simple KISS principle is always the golden rule. Keep it simple.
Yeah, could not agree more. And my personal takeaway and the advice is going to be listen to Vikram's advice. Context is really important. So, that is probably one of the best advice that we have heard on this podcast. So listen to that. On that note, Vikram, I really want to thank you for your time. This has been a powerful episode.
Thank you so much, Sam. Thank you so much. Really appreciate it.
Of course.
I cannot thank our guests enough for coming on the show, for sharing their knowledge and journey. I always pick up learnings from our guests, and hopefully you learned something new today. If you'd like to learn more about Vikram, head over to bettercommerce.io. It's bettercommerce.io. Links and more information will also be available in the show notes. Also, don't forget to subscribe and spread the word among folks with similar backgrounds. If you have any questions or comments about the show, please review and rate us on your favorite podcasting platform or DM me on any social channels. I'll try my best to respond personally and make sure you get help. Thank you, and I hope to get you on the next episode of the WBS podcast.
Thank you for listening to another episode of the WBS podcast. Be sure to subscribe on your favorite podcasting platform so you never miss an episode. For more information on growth strategies for SMBs using ERP and digital transformation, check out our community at WBS.rocks. We'll see you next time.